You have a job, you pay bills, you do your own laundry, and yet you still feel genuinely surprised when someone calls you sir or ma'am. You still look around a room full of adults and feel that half-second of confusion about when you became one of them. You still feel closer to 17 than to 40, and 40 is not as far away as it used to be. Nobody explained car insurance deductibles. Nobody told you what a W-2 was until you needed to file one. Nobody warned you that the check engine light could mean nothing or everything. You have Googled, "Is this normal?" about your own body more times than you can count. You have eaten cereal for dinner and felt a vague guilt about it that an actual adult probably wouldn't feel. If any of that is familiar, you're not alone and you are not broken. The easy version of this story is that your generation simply never grew up. Coddled, overprotected, choosing extended adolescence because adulthood looked hard and growing up felt optional. You've probably heard this. You may have believed it about yourself. But that explanation requires ignoring some very specific facts about the world you actually graduated into. In 2000, developmental psychologist Jeffrey Arnett named something that hadn't been said clearly. The transition to adulthood had fundamentally changed. Not because young people were failing, because the social and economic conditions that once made a fast, clean transition possible had quietly stopped being available. He called it emerging adulthood, a new developmental stage that had never existed at this scale for any previous generation. You graduated into an economy that had just collapsed, a housing market where the ownership your parents had at 29 was mathematically unreachable, a culture that had restructured every milestone your childhood told you to expect by a certain age. A 2012 survey of 1,000 young adults found that 60% said they did not yet feel they had fully reached adulthood, not a struggling minority. 60%. The contract changed after you signed it. By the time you were 8 years old, you had a clear picture of what grown-up looked like, built from watching your parents, your neighbors, every TV show you ever saw. That internal image formed in childhood. And then reality didn't match it at almost any point in your 20s or early 30s. The gap between the version of adulthood you expected and the one you actually got, that's where the feeling lives. Here's what 90s kids who don't feel like adults actually are. They are people who formed a clear internal model of adulthood during childhood, and then had the honesty not to pretend they were living inside it when the conditions weren't there. The discomfort is not immaturity, it's accuracy. The people who most convincingly perform adulthood are often the people who never examined whether the performance was real. You examined it. There's something specific about being a 90s kid that makes this harder. You were raised on a particular kind of optimism. Saturday morning cartoons, summers without schedules, the confidence of a decade that hadn't yet been fully saturated with adult anxiety. When the present gets heavy, your brain reaches back toward those coordinates. Not regression, not weakness. Just the brain returning to the last place where it felt certain. You are not behind. You are navigating a version of adulthood that didn't exist when the image of adulthood you carry was formed. That is not the same as being lost. That is the definition of adapting in real time. Without a manual, without the destination you were promised, without anyone giving you credit for how much that actually requires. The feeling was never personal failure. It was the most accurate response to what actually happened. You built something real in conditions designed to make it hard. You adapted without a guide, without the destination you were promised, without the arrival feeling you were told to expect. And you kept going anyway. That is not the same as not growing up. That's what growing up actually looked like for your generation.